Hey there techies, I'm Professor Tech, and this episode we're taking a look at the recently released Nvidia GeForce Now system and how well it works with the Valve Steam Deck. So get locked in, temper your expectations, and grab a snack because this one is a little complicated. Cloud gaming, some would say, is the final frontier for top-end gaming on any and all devices, while others would argue that it represents the end of ownership and the decline of the gaming market. As with most things, it probably sits somewhere in the middle, but for today's video, we're going to be looking at the state of cloud gaming, specifically cloud gaming on the Steam Deck. I'll be using a Steam Deck OLED for this experiment since it has the slightly newer Wi-Fi chipset, but you should see somewhat comparable results on a Steam Deck Classic, while perhaps having a little bit of an infringed performance, but ideally not much overall. So what has Nvidia done here? Well, they've successfully ported over their somewhat popular cloud-based gaming platform, Nvidia GeForce Now, previously seen on other systems and devices, most predominantly on Windows. But what is GeForce Now? Well, it's distinctly different from other gaming subscriptions in that it isn't something like Xbox Game Pass or PlayStation Plus, but rather access to higher level hardware through a cloud-based system. In theory, this should allow gamers to play their favorite games untethered to their desk in the comfort of their living room, their bed, their shower, and their pool. Okay, maybe not the last two. But yes, the idea is that as long as you are close to a strong and consistent Wi-Fi connection, you can have access to your entire games library, in theory. Here's the rough edges of how it works. When you sign up for an Nvidia GeForce Now membership, of which I was provided a code with no stipulations from Nvidia, you gain access to their platform. From there, you are able to log into your Steam, Epic Games, and other gaming launcher platforms like you would on your own PC system at home, except now you're tying those systems to a particular GeForce account so that the remote computer off in the ether is going to handle the game rendering and can download and install these games for you remotely. From there, you can start what's called a session, which depending on your tier of subscription will be capped at either 1 hour for the free tier, 6 hours for the priority tier, and 8 hours for the ultimate tier. Each tier also has its limits on frame rate, resolution, and overall bandwidth that can vary. I think it should be noted that you can begin multiple sessions within a day. So those 16-hour gaming binges may have to be sectioned off with breaks for food or even maybe touching some grass. Before jumping into my experience with the service on Steam Deck, I should note that it is available on several different platforms as a native application like Windows, Mac OS, as well as even Android. As for Chromebook users, it operates using a Chrome browser window, and this is how Nvidia manages to get GeForce Now running on a Steam Deck as well, via the Chrome browser window that is added during the application setup process. Now that you have a bit of background on Nvidia's GeForce Now, let's jump into my experience using it and what you should know before giving it a shot for yourself. The setup process for GeForce Now is relatively similar to the way you would install a non-Steam game launcher to Steam. You navigate to the appropriate page on Nvidia's website for the Steam Deck beta download it, run the application in desktop mode on the Steam Deck. From there, a short program is installed. You can then go into Steam while still in desktop mode and add the application as a non-Steam game. From there, restart your console into gaming mode and navigate over to the non-Steam game tab. You should find Nvidia GeForce Now as an option. From there, once you log in, be sure that you've either already signed up for an account or you generate one using that platform. This process wasn't the smoothest for me as my keyboard kept glitching out. It's not to say whether it was the deck or the application, but I would recommend setting this account up using another device like a smartphone or a full PC. Once in, you'll have the option to jump right into free-to-play games like Fortnite, Call of Duty, Warzone, a handful of others. However, you will need to have accounts set up with Epic, Activision, Blizzard, Steam, etc. in order to get into these games just as if you were on your own PC, not remote playing with one. And that's where my first major hiccup comes with the service and the process. When you go to launch a game, it will default to the play button. However, if you're not logged into one of the aforementioned game launcher accounts, it will simply redirect to the first one that pops up with an error message. No big deal. except that when I logged into my Steam account, it prompted me to what looked like an exclusively full-screen Windows install of Steam, and I had to select to install the games that I wanted to after logging in and selecting the game. This seems a little odd to me, as the machines running these games should ideally have most of the libraries of the games ready to go. All you should have to do is log in, and at the very least, the most popular titles should have this option, because a large component of the people that would be using this service likely would prioritize those titles. But for almost every other game game I installed beyond Call of Duty, the install speeds were exceedingly fast and I didn't have to reinstall them again. So keep in mind, when I say install, I mean install on the remote computer the GeForce Now is streaming to you, not your actual Steam Deck. But once I had sorted through that issue, I booted into Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and the game had to set up shaders. Just like any other system running the application natively, this took about 5 minutes to complete. And combined with the usual slug of installing COD after an update, I had a hard time telling what was the GeForce Now slowdown versus the remote PC's native slowdown. I do want to note that this isn't necessarily GeForce's fault, but going back to what I mentioned about having these remote machines auto-update and having the libraries ready to go, that would effectively nullify this issue, especially if they're potentially aiming to capture new audiences, as many people that own a Steam Deck are not also big PC gamers. I know several people that personally bought the Steam Deck because they wanted to play PC games but wanted a console-like experience. So their familiarity with these little technical hiccups would be fairly pronounced and annoying. And for anybody that's a new Steam Deck user, make sure to get subscribed because I have an update video coming out on the 5 things that you should do first when you get your new, flashy, sexy Steam Deck. Okay, so that pretty much covers the setup, but what about the performance? So probably the thing that most users are interested in is how well GeForce Now performs when compared to natively running an application on the Steam Deck. Since performance can be measured in a few different ways depending on what you're hoping to prioritize and what you're comparing it to, I think it's important to break that down a bit before diving in. So we'll cover graphic fidelity, frames per second, streaming issues, and smoothness. And ultimately, the thing that makes or breaks live game streaming services, the input responsiveness, or lag. Let's start with graphic fidelity. Jumping into COD's graphic settings, I can confirm that when using the Ultimate Membership class, the game does recognize the graphics card as a 4080, which is more than capable of running virtually any modern game at fundamentally max settings. Sure, there will always be cutting-edge games that need another graphics card generation or two to fully realize their full real-time potential, but since we're streaming this to a Steam Deck that has a resolution of no more than 1280 by 800, we are able to really push the graphics capability. Other than resolution, we're running every game in this video full ham, no holds bar. And honestly, it doesn't disappoint in this respect. The graphic fidelity is fantastic and honestly the best that you can get at this resolution that we're running. However, while I doubt that this is the game's fidelity lacking, this is a good time to bring up the streaming smoothness factor. By this, I mean the compression artifacting that the video signal being sent over the internet to my Steam Deck and what graphical artifacting that creates when playing. Now, without doing a full comprehensive deep dive into how video compression in real time works and the multiple ways that it can be implemented, because there isn't just one, let me provide a brief and very basic explanation. Most video compression works by analyzing But why does the image need to be compressed? In order to transmit the data faster. This is at the heart of what makes streaming and game streaming even more so work in the first place. And so while we can effectively remote operate a PC that can push insane graphical fidelity at almost real time, we are ultimately limited by the throughput of our internet connection and have to make a decision. Do we want better looking frames on a frame-to-frame basis, or do we want faster response times? And to live in the realm of reality, we are also limited by the speed of light. If the server your game is being sent from is in California and you're on the Atlantic coast, that can lead to microseconds, but still microseconds of delay, already adding to the existing game delay that you would experience running it natively. In a game like COD, I do prefer the faster response times, whereas in a game like, say, Ori and the Will of the Wisp, I want graphical fidelity. And that's why we have several games to show you today so that you have an idea of each varied experience. Before I show you the examples, I want to be very clear. This service is incredibly exciting, and I think it's a great step in the right direction to make games more accessible to people, to more users, and for most people, I think it's something worth trying out to see for yourself if it works for you, your hardware, and your personal needs when gaming. However, it is not perfect, and it has bugs, and it can be frustrating, especially on the Steam Deck beta form in the way that it currently stands. So with that said, let's jump into our games, cover responsiveness while we're at it, and let's look at Call of Duty Modern Warfare up first. A couple things to point out. While my inputs are mostly being read in near real time, there are instances where inputs are misread or even underread, which leads to my aim being incredibly off at the worst moments while targeting other players. Graphically speaking, everything looks really strong, but any maps that include strong defined lines, such as the airport with its architecture, are prone to making the jaggy effect even more pronounced. Constant pixel fogging that happens due to the compression in a game that runs at this fast of a pace also leads to the game looking worse than it's actually running at on a server PC, but this is ideally something that will improve with time and in future releases. Overall, the COD experience on GeForce Now with Steam Deck is a 6 out of 10 for multiplayer for me. However, it would be better in single player, but competitively, this just isn't in a great position to be useful right now. Almost immediately, I felt a big difference in this game over COD. My inputs weren't being misread nearly as often, and the game felt more responsive, even though I'm sure I was using the same amount of bandwidth. This is likely due to the number of round trips the signal takes for single-player offline games versus online multiplayer games while being streamed. While I still felt that it wasn't exactly real time, it was close enough that anybody that games less than I do would probably not feel a major difference and wouldn't know it was being streamed if they were just handed the device. Graphical fidelity was fairly strong, and the jaggy effect was less pronounced except in areas of really high contrast, such as looking at power lines in the sky, or areas where there's a really distinct color shift. There were some times when I was playing that the camera in the game failed to recognize that I was using a controller and would default back to keyboard inputs, which effectively brought my game to a standstill in handheld mode, and I think I can reliably blame this on the service, and it may be something that's worth noting to be improved on in future updates for Nvidia. I would give the Fallout 4 experience on GeForce Now an 8 out of 10. Overall, Ori and the Will of the Wisp was my favorite game to use GeForce Now with because it was responsive, had little to no issues with input mix-ups, and it was easily the best looking game out of the roundup. But a lot of this is due to the low complexity of the art style, with big and bold colorful palettes while leading to lots of contrast. It does lead to easier compression for the server, which can help ease those jaggies and artifacting. It's one of those things that once you go so far, it actually becomes easier rather than getting more complex. While it was not perfect with occasional controller and keyboard mix-ups on the system end, it was an overall 9 out of 10 experience. The only downside is that Ori is not a demanding game, and when run even better natively on the Steam Deck just because of its low threshold of entry. But hey, if you're using GeForce Now on Android, maybe it's worth trying. And if that's something you'd be interested in learning more about, comparing, say, the Steam Deck to the performance of GeForce Now on other platforms like Windows and Android, leave a like and a comment down below letting me know what you'd like me to compare it to. Now, the last game that I tested was Doom Eternal, and Okay, so this was just bad. While Ori was my best experience, and COD along with Fallout 4 were kind of middling experiences, Doom Eternal was just bad. Input mixing everywhere, input lag everywhere, graphical fidelity issues that made it hard to see where things were, and streaming smoothness was very broken with artifacting and compression elements virtually everywhere. I only include this example in this video because while I don't have the capacity to test every game that's ever been made, I didn't want to leave this review without noting that some games, and even just different Steam Decks, may have vastly different experiences that I currently don't have an explanation for, other than just Nvidia continuing to optimize their service and perform updates. For now, Doom Eternal on Steam Deck OLED via Nvidia GeForce Now received an unplayable score for me. So get subscribed in the future if you want me to do an update on this and see if they've improved that so that it can function. But right now, I would not try to play Doom Eternal if you were to ask me right now as of filming. So let's do a little bit of a comparison running the games natively to their cloud-based streaming platform brethren. Keeping this section short compared to those running games natively on Steam Deck, I would say that if you're able to run them natively, this will generally give you a better experience hands down. I think the real pocket for this service in tandem with the Steam Deck user is going to be people that want to play games that generally won't run on Steam Deck, like Call of Duty or games like Fortnite and Minecraft. While there are several workarounds to get those games running natively on Steam Deck, being able to keep your user profile and not having to soft hack your system every time you want to play them by an update on the back end causing the application to not work and doing other sorts of workarounds, this system and that cloud service may be the trick to making this work for you. So in short, I think if you're someone whose library runs fine as is, I don't think I would currently recommend this service to you, but if you're somebody who really likes playing games that won't run on the Steam Deck normally and you don't want to go buy an Asus ROG Ally or another competing system, this might be a service for you to consider in lieu of purchasing a second handheld like the Ally or the MSI Claw. However, if you're considering that, make sure to check out my recent video about the ROG Ally almost a year after its release. It's come a long way and I have some updated thoughts on it, which you can check out there. So with that being said, I'm Professor Tech. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to hit the like button and get subscribed down below. Validate my feelings of inadequacy in the comments below, or pump up my ego. Whichever you're feeling today, you're right. I appreciate all of you, and I hope you have an absolutely fantastic week. Goodbye, my friends.